This is Bindi Heit. As the founder of the ethical change agency, Bindi is not only a leader in digital communications and podcasting, but also a dedicated spirituality coach helping others find clarity, purpose, and connection in their lives and businesses. In our conversation, Bindi opens up about some of the most painful experiences of her life, including the deep shame of bankruptcy in her 20s and how identifying and getting rid of her trash has fueled her mission to help others discover their purpose and overcome their own struggles. Join us as we dive deep into Bindi's story, her incredible work in the podcast industry, and how she's helping create a better world, one connection at a time. Get comfortable and let's flip the lid with the inspiring Bindi Heit. Enjoy. Welcome back to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now. Man, I just get so blessed by the people who are willing to come in here and have real, raw, open conversations about their life. Not just the highlight reel, but the things that they've been through that have shaped who they are today. Today, we have an amazing guest with us. I've had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time with Bindi over probably the last 6 months. It's not as much time as I know we're going to spend in the future, but I've been on her show now twice, and just the way she navigates conversations, the level of depth that she's able to create in her guests is just absolutely incredible. She is one of the better interviewers from any show I've ever been on. But what's really beautiful is she's known as a podcast industry leader. She's helped judge the Australian Podcast Awards. She's had over 500 people from around the world on her various shows, and she's produced and launched and built all these other shows. And oh, by the way, that's just scratching the surface of all this woman does. So, Bindi, I'm looking forward to jumping in with you today.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, dude, I know it's really early over there in Australia, and I'm like grateful that we found time for me to be on your show a couple of times, and now we're getting to do this. Unfortunately, because of the time change, the live show hasn't worked out, and that is okay, because that means we get even more goodness from you today. Now, you are a phenomenal connector, a phenomenal human, and I gave a very brief intro on the little I know about you and what you do. But this is the one question I ask everybody on this show. Who are you in your words?
Oof. That's, I ask people this question all the time, Brian. No one ever asks me.
I know, but now you're in the seat. So that's the pleasure I get to flip it on you.
You've put me in the hot seat, mate. Look, I see myself as the word that comes to mind, and you know me, I'm quite esoteric. The word that comes to mind, you're probably going to laugh, is angelic.
I'm not going to laugh. I felt that one to my core.
And everything, I deal with a lot of psychics. I deal with a lot of, spiritual kind of people every day. And they often tell me that I'm an earth angel. And that I'm here as a messenger, which, like, look at what I do, right? But the connector part of it just comes naturally, I don't see myself as whatever my day job is. I don't see myself as a daughter, a sister, whatever that is. I just see myself as the one being I am. And, and that just resonates. And I feel that energetically. Like a lot of the relationships I have are quite energetic. And even though we're on opposite sides of the world right now, Brian, that is why we connect so well.
Totally.
So I think for me, I guess probably sounds a bit, bit woo-woo, but I describe myself as angelic. But a lot of people also call me a queen. I know that also sounds a bit, influencer, but a lot of people call me Queen Bee because I don't know. It's not that I command a space. It's that I let people know I'm there. And I have this energy about me that I'm like, respect me, understand me, see me, hear me, because I'm here.
Yeah.
So much so that I actually have a tattoo, Brian, that I am queen.
Yeah. That a girl. I love it.
So, I guess if you want to put it in a nutshell, I'm a couple of things.
You're an angelic queen.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I really like that. I've never had anybody answer that question that way. I think it's really beautiful. Now, what I heard and nuanced in so much of what you said is that these were external people who were shining a light on how they saw you.
Mm.
Yet you seem to have taken on those descriptors as your own. At what point did you start to believe that you were angelic? And at what point did you own that you're a queen?
It's probably only been in the last 6 or so years, I would say, where I really started, to go deep on my healing journey. And, well, I won't get into the full details of that just yet, but through that, I really started to understand who I was and what I wanted in life. And, I was one of those people who was always, shrunk down, hidden away. And I just went, no, I'm not here for that. And that's when I started to see that, yeah, I'm here to be a messenger, whatever that is. But to do that, I can't hide. I can't be small. It's time to not play small anymore. It's time to shine. And then people pick up that light, So it's in the last few years, as I've started to connect more with myself and understand who I am. And, I actually became a spiritual coach myself and started to help other people connect with themselves, that I was like, yeah, I am this, because everybody else is seeing that light. I can see it too. And through that light, I just went, yeah, I am these things. And I will stand in my strength and my power that I am those things. And that's, I guess, why people react to me the way that they do.
How do people react to you?
I've noticed that a lot of people, it's almost like a magnet sometimes, where particularly when I'm doing podcast interviews, and a lot of people are overseas, they say to me, it feels like time stood still. And there was nothing else but just you and I in the conversation that we're having, and that it just like they don't want to leave. Like they're so connected, they don't want to leave, and they're just there in that moment, and there is nothing else. And I guess even in person, there's people that are like, I just want to hang around with you, because you got this light and this energy about you that is nice to be around. And it's like it's kind of cool, like the people want to be around you, not repel from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so what I'll reflect back to you, and it's going to be connected as well to even something that I've started to own in my own voice, but it's true for you. You are very present, and your presence is felt as a result. Similar to what you were saying and being able to step into and own the angelic queen that you are, I, about 18 months ago, started to really kind of shift my own paradigm and have been saying this statement since the last 18 months, but it's true for everyone as well. My presence is my present.
Yeah.
I am the gift. Right? And I think that's true for all of us. But unfortunately, we don't always have the opportunity to start to unwrap ourselves at a level that we can see the gift and the treasure that does hide within. Right? We have all these narratives and things that cause us to hide in our own shadow. And until someone finally shines a light on what they see in us in a way that we can't see, we'll remain hidden in our shadow instead of stepping into our own light. If all these people had been telling you this for a long period in your life, my sense is, because you were hiding in other periods of your life, that wasn't always the case. So could you give us a little bit of insight into maybe some of the dynamics that caused you to hide originally? And what was the turning point where you finally realized, I'm going to start listening to what others are saying to me?
Oh boy. How far back do we want to go?
You tell me, man.
I guess even if and it's when I get to have these conversations with people that you have these snap moments where you're like, shit, yeah, right. Yeah, it all makes sense now. So when I was born back in the 70s, I was born with turned eyes, so
Okay.
I didn't have very good eyesight, and so I had to go through surgery when I was 2 to correct my eyesight. And so the first 6, 8, 9 years of my life, I was wearing an eye patch, and so going through all of your formative years with that,
Ugh.
I got teased a lot. I got bullied a lot. And other myriad of health issues growing
Yeah.
up. So and later on in life you learn that that's the thing that your parents remember of you. And so there was that. And yeah, I was bullied horribly as a kid, for various reasons, including that one. And then yeah, like when you start to then grow up, um, all the dynamics shift again, and you're not one of the cool kids, but you find your own way, um, and then when I started to get into adulthood, I I had trouble finding a job, get my shit together, and I actually I've just I'm sharing my story I shared it years ago in a podcast, but I'm about to do it at a women's workshop.
Yeah.
But part of the story was I eventually got a job, and I eventually started to get into relationships, and they were quite turbulent. A lot of things were going wrong. I ended up bankrupt. I was abused by men, only to find out many years later that I was gay.
Ugh.
Then I got abused by women, and just all the things that you could possibly tick off a bucket list of the war going wrong. I had them. Bankruptcy, redundancy, abuse, all of these things made me just think, nah, I'll just hide. It'll be easier. And then when I stripped all that back, I was like, nah, I don't need any of this.
Yeah.
I don't need them. I don't need to heal anybody else. I need to heal me.
Yeah.
And that's where things started to change, where I went, you know what? It's not them. It's me. I was the one in the mirror every day, not them. And so that's where it started to flip. That's where I flipped my lid, Brian.
Ugh. Ugh. I was the one in the mirror every day. That's powerful. I haven't heard it said that way before. I've heard lots of people talk about how we're the one that we look at in the mirror every day, but you just took it from a complete place of ownership. And here's the part I think a lot of people don't understand about ownership, which you clearly embody. It doesn't mean that you are at fault because it's you that needs to grow and change, right? It doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong because you're having faced these types of things. And it's not to suggest that there's anything wrong with you. It's that ultimately stepping into ownership is realizing that you're not going to look outside of yourself for validation, connection, and love.
Yeah.
You learn to do those three things for yourself first. And then all of a sudden, you start receiving them externally in a way that maybe hasn't existed before in your life.
Yeah.
I appreciate the level of emotion that I not only feel with you, but can see in your face through all of this. And I also can appreciate when we're looking back into our past and some of the trash, right, that we know exists there. It can make us, reminiscent. We can feel those things before, those levels of disconnection, the areas where we haven't felt worthy, seen, understood. What would you say of all of the things you kind of integrated in that answer stands out for you as potentially the most painful when you look back?
Oh my God. I think it was, and it's all connected, right? I think it was probably ending up bankrupt. That was pretty painful because the level of shame.
Yeah.
that, and it affects every part of your world, basically. I think that was pretty rough. And this was years ago, not like it is now. Like,
Yeah.
people go through that kind of process in a breeze now. This was years ago when it was really difficult. So, I was only young. I was in my 20s, I think. And to go through that so young was really rough, like just
Yeah.
when you're really starting to make something of yourself. And so that impacts your relationships with family, with, whoever you're involved with, your work, everything, because, in that shame, you're trying to hide it, not let anyone know anything's gone wrong, and, keep the lights on, so to speak. And so, it got to a point where I had to, bear it all and tell the truth, because it was the only way I was going to get through it.
Yeah.
And so, because it was so interconnected with my entire world, that was probably the most painful.
Yeah. I find it interesting, and I just highlight this for the listeners for something you also already know. It's interesting that to have been the victim of domestic violence from numerous partners, to have been bullied, beat up, misunderstood, right? Had to overcome physical challenges, like all of these things that actually do directly interact with other people, and you're receiving both physical and emotional harm as a result of it. It's interesting that the shame connected to financial loss and bankruptcy is more painful than all of the others. And to your point, it makes a lot of sense. It does connect to everything. And we live in a world where a lot of the external opinions and connections and relationships are also what help us feel connected in certain ways. And those of us who learn to hide in different places in our life learn to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. So now all of a sudden it's a direct correlation to our value and our worth. How did the shame show up for you in that time? What did it look like? How did it feel? And what was the moment in that process that you finally decided to step into truth?
So I guess to sort of give context, when it all happened, I was in a relationship with a man who was, I don't even know how we ended up together. We'd been together a couple of years, and he was not faithful. He was not supportive. He was abusive. He was largely to blame for where financially we had ended up, particularly for myself, because I actually know he wasn't. It was all my fault, because I bore the brunt of it. I thought, oh, I'll take care of it, but no, I was the one who went under the bus. So
yeah, because you were trying to carry the weight for him, because again, it was love and connection through what I'm going to do for him, right? And you got screwed.
And so on top of it, we I think when it all started to unravel, I was living in what was, I'm putting in inverted commas here, his house, which he wasn't paying the mortgage on. And I didn't know this in the background, naive little me, going about my world. I'd go to work, and I learned that he wasn't going to work in the end. He was putting on all these facades that he had these injuries, he couldn't go to work. And so meanwhile, he's off being unfaithful with prostitutes, spending money on them, things like that. And when I found out, I cannot even tell you the rage I felt.
Oh, man.
And so financially, things got that bad that, and sheriff isn't a word we use a lot here, but when it comes to property seizure, they do use it. They came and they cleared the house out and kicked us out. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I haven't ever spoken about this, by the way. And
I've had a lot of guests tell me that they talk about things here that they've never spoken about somewhere else. So thank you for the gift in your transparency and vulnerability, because I believe that every time we speak our own truth, we give others permission to feel and say the same.
And I had blacked this memory up, Brian. Thank you. So I can remember being evicted from that property, and I was like, shit, what am I going to do now? Like, I had a really good job. I had a car. I had, I didn't have my own property or anything like that. So packed up as much shit as I could get my hands on, put some stuff in storage, put some stuff in a car, and went and lived in a motel for 3 days. I was literally homeless. And I couldn't tell my parents. Could you imagine that? Like, they'd be like, yeah, we told you so. And anyway, we lived out of this shitty motel for 3-4 days, and I'm trying to like keep this facade of everything's okay when I go to work, that everything's fine. Everything's burning, everything's fine. And anyway, after about 3-4 days, I went like, this isn't sustainable. We can't keep this up. Like, one, the daily rate for a motel is ridiculous, and just living this way, I can't do it. I cannot continue to do this. And so I had to fess up to mum and dad, and I said, look, I need your help. I'm in deep. And I think before that, we'd tried to go into a rental property, and again, he didn't pay the rent, and we got evicted. So this was the second time in a row. And right at this time, one of the things that also impacted that was I lost my grandmother, and I was like, Jesus. And so that then meant that her property was empty. So I said to mum and dad, I need your help. Can I go stay at grandma's? And so I lived there for a while. And stupid me, I let him come with me, didn't I? And that was where it all really unraveled. One day, I remember, because my grandmother had a big property, and he had this souped up car. I thought he was the shit. And I found out about all the things he was doing, and he was continuing to do them when we got out there. And I remember one day mum and dad were down there, they were helping me with some stuff, and he had his car in the dirt driveway, and he started yelling at me. I can't even remember what it was about. And he was a trained martial arts fighter. And he was a big man. He was like 6'4" and like 130 kilos. Like, he would have knocked the shit out of me, right? Anyway, I remember opening the passenger door of the car, and he was just going off at me. He was just frothing at me, and I just was like, that was where it all snapped. And I was ready to take the hit. I was ready for him to just like rearrange my face. I was ready. And I just said, you're not worth it. You're not worth it. Get in your car and go, and don't ever come back. And that was it. That was the moment. And yeah.
Wow.
It's horrible.
Wow. Bindi, thank you for taking us down that journey. The level of shame makes even more sense with all the context.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, in so many levels, right? Because you kept opening yourself to love and be appreciated, and you kept getting let down, abandoned, abused. And, you kept allowing it to happen. Right. And that's probably the only place that you carry responsibility in terms of what I hear, is that you allowed yourself to put up with that. And here's the reality. There are people who live in those environments for decades and don't escape it.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is one of those situations that I find interesting, because it feels like it's the most difficult, most challenging, most testing period in your life. But I used to look at all of these things through a lens of I was being tested. And now I always ask myself, how am I being protected and promoted? Look at the bullet you dodged. I mean, really, it sounds like he was a ticking time bomb that could have ended in a far greater demise. And you are strong, and you are capable, and you are smart, and you have learned to step into this voice that's now empowering for so many others.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you went as real and as raw as you just did right out of the gate. We're 24 minutes into this conversation, and it's already been scratching the baseline of deep for you, and I appreciate all of that. I do want to ask one more question, and it's specifically connected to the comment when you said, "I later learned in life that I was gay."
Mm.
If you're comfortable and willing to go there, I'd love to just ask a question around it, because it's, again, this is a very polarizing topic in parts of our world, right? I am somebody who views everyone through a lens of love and connection. And I am a believer that in most situations, right, that's why I choose to use the word sexual orientation versus other language, because oftentimes I believe people are hardwired this way. They just may not realize it for whatever reason because of the conditioning in their world. So if you're comfortable, I would love it if you would be willing to kind of talk about what that transition from living a heterosexual to transitioning to a homosexual life really looked like in practicality, and just maybe give some insight into like what that felt like when, I mean, for you to say I learned later that I was gay implies that you didn't always know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're okay, I just find this a very fascinating topic about our human experience. And I would love to get some insight from your experience, not asking you to speak for anyone else.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a common theme that, like you've said, people are hardwired with this and they're just not aware because the conditioning. Yeah. I was brought up to be, you get married, you have children, the whole 9 yards, the white wedding, the whole thing. And I was like, that just doesn't seem like my jam. And even though I tried hard to make that happen,
it just never vibed. You just knew, right?
No, and even when I was a teenager, like in high school and stuff like that, I always had short hair. I always I like things a certain way, and even some of my family members were like, "You sure you're not gay?" I'm like, "Oh, stop it! No, don't be stupid." And anyway, I can't even. And I know this sounds horrible. I can't even count the number of guys I dated. Like, I was really beautiful, Brian. Believe it or not, I was a beautiful woman at 20. And so when I was younger, they used to say I looked like Roxette. You remember Roxette, the singer? I used to look like that.
Yes.
Anyway, I always had a date, right? Always. And it was when I was spending that time on my own after I got rid of that dickhead, that I didn't have any of the chaos or the distractions of all, trying to chase someone, have them fix me or me fix them, that I just let all of that go. And you're going to laugh because this is how I had my awakening, right? I had a dream. And guess who was in that dream, Brian? Ellen DeGeneres.
I love that. Okay, so tell me more.
I cannot to this day remember what was in the dream. I just know she
was in it.
She was in the dream, and I woke up, and it was like this light bulb moment where I went, "Oh, it all makes sense right now."
Yeah.
It's just like the penny dropped at that moment. I went, "Oh, right, this is what I've been doing wrong the whole time." And I can tell you, it just, I don't know, I had this sense of belonging. Like I was like where I was meant to be. It all made sense and nothing felt foreign. I didn't have to try hard. It was just effortless. And I remember my first girlfriend that I had, like, it was just like you were floating on air. Like there was nothing like it. It was just bliss. And I just was like, okay, well, this all makes sense. Fabulous.
You're giving me goosebumps and chills down my spine when you talk about that. Like, that's beautiful.
So, and I just, and then having to tell people, like particularly my mum, she was like, oh, that means you're not going to have a wedding and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I may have a wedding one day, but it may not be like the one you're thinking.
It might just look a little different than what you were hoping or expecting.
That doesn't mean you're not going to have kids. I said, well, I could if I really wanted to, but I just don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it was like I was taking on her dreams when they weren't actually mine. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, those aren't mine.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then from there I just everything made a lot more sense.
Of course it did.
But I still had some of that underlying kind of needing someone to fix,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I went through the cycle again. Then I started to be abused by women, and I was just like, oh, damn it, just step away. Step away.
Mm.
So, and that's what I did. And that's when the healing started.
Man, yeah, protected and promoted, right? You got out of that situation with the dickhead. It got some alone time, actually allowed yourself permission to go inward, and all of a sudden you're like stepping into who you've always been, but never had the ability to even see it until you were quiet enough to. I think that's so beautiful, and to the point of like friends and family saying things, right? Like, it's also interesting because there are so many times that people will ask questions that really aren't in their permission to ask, like, right? Like that, exactly. Well, have you ever considered you're gay? Well, what if I really am and I just don't want to tell you, right? Like, what if I don't want to share, right? Like when couples first get together, it's like, well, when are you going to get married? When are you guys going to have kids?
Yeah.
What if we don't want to have kids? Right? Like, it's just interesting. All of these conditioned next step things that, so many things are conditioned for us to believe in this world. I've had some very, very good friends that I knew for a long time finally come out. And, I had to like bite my tongue from not utilizing humor in one situation with one of my buddies. One of my best friends were sitting across the table and you could just tell he sunk, right? And he's like, Brian, I got to tell you something. And what popped into my mind was literally like, what's his name? Right? Like that, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. And I was like, no, bite my tongue. Like, let him, like, this is his moment to share his truth. But I was trying to be respectful. And he says it to me and I was like, yeah, I know. I've always known. Like, I love you. Like, what's his name? How long you guys been together? Right? And it was like all this weight was lifted.
Yeah.
That never needed to be there.
Yeah. And I had the same thing. All these other people that I told, they're like, I could have told you that. And I was like, why the hell didn't you give me the memo?
Yeah. But I think to the point of even what you said in the subtlety, it's like you were living your life based on your standards your mom's standards and your mom's dreams over your own, which whether we're talking about sexual orientation or career goals or where and what kind of life we want to live, like these are the same patterns that get layered on all of us in some form or fashion. It just looks a little different for each one of us. I appreciate that you were also able to not only advocate for yourself early and often in some of these situations, but what it really led to is your ability to advocate for yourself so well today. And you've talked a lot about when that healing journey began and what it really started to open up for you. And I know that you do a ton in helping other people at this point. Could you give a little bit of insight? I know you said it was 6 years ago that you started to own the Angelic Queen title. That's not when your healing began, though.
No.
Give us a little feel for when you are remembering the healing journey began, and give a little perspective to the timeline of repair that it's been taking to get to where you are today.
Oh, as in the last 6 years bit, or
no, like from the moment you decided to lean in and start doing your healing, like for me, I'll give an example of where I was going with the question, right? I became aware at 27 that I was dealing with shame for the first time at 27. So I consider a lot of my real healing through shame, what uncovered then later with anger, to have began around 27. So about 12, 13 years ago, right? And so I often look at through the lens of not just all that I've done in the last 12 years, but also where I started and where I am today, right? Because so many people still today will judge us based on who we are today and the book they see without really understanding how many chapters are even in it.
Well, I think probably to give it context, there's a couple of things. What I started to do, so where I am now, Brian, I never thought I would ever be living in my own house that I built. So it was around that time that I went, I'm not taking anybody's shit no more. And that was even in my career where I was like, I got in this job And it was just like, it was horrible, absolutely bloody horrible. Like over micromanagement, no understanding of what I brought to the table. And I lasted 8 months, and I walked in one day, wrote my resignation letter, and left that same day, because I was like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. And I didn't have another job to go to. And I just built this house. I was like, I will find a way. It'll be fine. I'll find a way. I just walked out. But it was around that time that things really started to change. And that was where I really stepped into my power. Like, and it was also just before that I'd been made redundant from a job I absolutely loved and had been in for nearly a decade. It came out of the blue, and was done in a really shitty way. But it gave me the position to where I needed to step next, which I didn't understand at the time. So that was a huge, that was a really painful time, because me not working,
Yeah.
what happens? So there was a stint in that particular year where I wasn't working for a good 6 months, and in your 40s, that just doesn't happen. And was it 40s? Yeah, I started my 40s, and I then started my own podcast. So this was the very first podcast that I did, and before that, also for some background, I ran a local radio station here for a while. It was a community station for the youth of Brisbane, and I did that for a number of years, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and that was where that connection piece came together for me. It was bringing people together, sharing that message, and that's where that started for me. And
I love that.
That was really where things started to move for me in that direction. And when I stepped away from it, I really missed it. And so as part of my healing journey, I started a podcast called State of You. And it was kind of like my therapy. So basically, the start of it was me telling my story, and then I'd go into all the things I learned through all the shit I'd been through.
Yeah.
And I only lasted about 8 episodes because the guest that I had asked me to go and host their show, which I did for Women in Business for a year. And then it just took off from there, and then I started my show. And during that time I had, I got all my career sorted. I was meeting all these people who were healers that were showing me the doorway to where I needed to go. And this is where I got into meditation. And I swear to God, I do have a photo somewhere of me in Tasmania, of all places, when I did my first guided meditation. And I look high. You should look at me. I look like I'm high when I came out the other side of it.
I believe it.
But it was like something shifted in that, where I went, this is where it is. And since then, I've become a spiritual coach. I've just released my first meditation album, and I'm getting my full meditation teacher certification. So, there was all kinds of different healing I went through. Like I had, through all the people I met through the podcast, some of them locally that I could go hang out with, learn things from them. They introduced me to other people, different experiences I'd never had in my life. And I was just like, I feel like I fit in here. And so through that, I was experimenting with all kinds of things. I got into sound healing, like full-on sound healing. I did that for 2 years, and it radically changed me.
Oh, yeah. It's magical.
Radically.
Yeah.
And I am still very, very good friends with my healer. And we've worked together a lot in the last 6 or so years. And that's probably, where my biggest piece of healing has come from, is just getting all of those things out of my energetic body and letting them go.
Yeah. There's so much power in what you just said. And I'm going to just bring it really, really clearly. I think you've heard me say this before. I'm sure our audience has as well, but it's really important based on what you just said. I believe that there's 4 areas that we all suffer. It's the things that are left unsaid, the things we lack permission to feel or say, the things we lack the words to articulate or understand, or the things that are left undone. I believe, and I've told you this before, that I believe that my existence and reason for being on this planet is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. But it's also selfishly motivated, because the more I talk about it, the more I normalize it, in whether it's the anger that almost ripped apart my marriage, or the financial distress that I felt a few years back when I had to burn everything to the ground, or you name it, the list goes on, right? Every time I talk about it, it carries less and less weight inside me. It alleviates the suffering because I'm acting, saying, and doing. But it also gives people permission to feel and say things they wouldn't have otherwise, and words to articulate and understand it so they themselves can free themselves. You having such a strong voice and being able to utilize your voice, your experience, and your lessons, regardless of the medium, is a beautiful way to normalize the reality of all aspects of life that many people still don't talk about. And this is the really cool part about it. You also feel better every time you do it, because you said it, right? Like, you get to release all of that stuff from your energetic body. So whether it's through sound healing, whether it's through Reiki, whether it's through meditation, or any other modality of healing, a lot of it is also about how to get it out, to get what's been buried out so that we can actually move. You also said just then, and it's so funny, Bindi, like, you and I are energetically connected for sure, because I told you I don't structure questions, but I do have like ideas in certain things and where I would like to get some context. And there's been 2 or 3 times today that in an answer to one question, you've actually just happened to go down the path of something that had popped into my consciousness. You said you're a spiritual coach. And what's funny is that word has been sticking out to me. And what I knew the timing wasn't right to ask any of the other questions around this, but I have to tell you something, because I want you to do 2 things here. First, I'm, for a very personal reason, because of a good friend and a client of mine, I literally, in my coaching with him this morning, and I'm not calling out who it is, I'm not going to say the name publicly, but this person will know when they listen to this episode, and I'm going to make sure they listen to it. I get a note this morning that, and now this guy, okay, has faith and spirituality connected to a lot of his beliefs and a lot of his practices historically in his life, okay? There is a lot more involvement, even from a professional perspective, in what he's done in spirituality. He just had a conversation with somebody that tried to tell him that there is no business in being a spiritual coach because people won't pay for it because it's not tangible. Now, for obvious reasons, I handled this already in terms of what I did. And I not only flipped that on its head, but I also know another spiritual coach who runs a $3 million practice and charges the highest of highest rates to be able to access people. Like, there's a lot of things I do that are intangible. So I'd love to understand, how do you define spiritual coaching? And for those that don't know, what's the opportunity, not just for impact in spiritual coaching, but also for income?
It's funny because I used to do more of a business coaching kind of a thing. And it's actually a psychologist said to me, "You're not a business coach. You deal with people's psyches. You don't deal with their books."
Yeah.
And that's essentially it, is that I help them get to the root of who they are. And really it's about the connection with themselves. And that has a flow-on effect to every other part of your life, whether it be your income, your relationships, how you feel about yourself, every single aspect to do with you as a human.
Yeah.
And to give you some context, some of the clients I've had, the everyday Joe kind of, particularly women, seem to gravitate towards me. And they're mums that are really struggling, like they can't find joy in their lives, and they're like, they're almost on the edge, going like, help me find some joy, or this is it for me. And it is a really tough gig there with a woman who cannot find 1 inch of joy in her life. Like, you are digging in every corner trying to help her find it. And I remember I had this one client, and I swear every edge I went into for a good hour, she would not relent. And we eventually got there, but it was like, man, like, I don't know how people live like this, to be in such misery day
Yeah.
after day, like that you can't find anything for yourself, not even just like a minute of joy where you go, I really love this TV show,
Mm-hmm.
or you know what, I love a good cup of coffee, or you know what, I really love my husband, or something like that. And I'm just like,
Or I'm really gay and I just learned it and I need to now
yeah,
finally own it, right? Like any of those.
yeah.
Like,
So it's as simple as that, Brian, is just finding an ounce of joy in your life, and also finding what lights you up. You know, like
it's a beautiful answer.
there's another client I had. She was in a really tough situation, and I said, look, you know, right now you've got to think about you. And this is spoiler alert. The message that sits under the motivational speech I'm about to give for these women at a workshop. Where the end line of it all is, it all begins with you, which is what my show's about as well, Brian, is that you got to think about you.
Yep.
You're the one in the mirror, right?
Yep.
So what you need to do is actually put yourself first, and you also need to just be conscious and be proactive
Yep.
about the actions you take in your day that are for you. Like,
Bingo.
Are they for everyone else, or are they for you? And what net result is that going to give you if you don't do them?
Yep. I believe that being selfish is the least selfish thing we can do.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's, you know, you answered that question, by the way, so fucking beautifully. And so in alignment with not only the way I reframed it with him, but just the way that I operate and think. You know, I could be described as a spiritual coach. I don't label myself that way, but as it relates to how you described it, it is that. And there is an element of spirituality that's involved, because there's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual selves, and I address all of them. Yeah. Right. But it is interesting because that's what I flipped on him, as I said, look, anybody who's going to tell you that is somebody who's not been able to articulate and demonstrate value in the intangible, which means that it didn't work for them, that it's not that it won't work for you. In fact, there's great value in being able to help people find the intangible elements of life that don't have KPIs we can measure, like joy, freedom, fulfillment, better connection and relationships with your spouse and kids, like better health. Like there's all these elements of the intangible that when we finally shed those layers of armor and start healing the pains from within, we actually get to experience. So I have to ask you, because this is a part of even how you answered the question, right? Trying to find joy. When was the first moment in your life you remember experiencing joy?
Whew. And this is me, and you know, I'm a little bit psychic, Brian. And I get messages from a higher power.
I know you do. It's beautiful.
The first thing that came to mind was a vision of me when I was about 2. My mum used to bake, and the mixing beaters of the cake batter of the mixing beaters. There's a photo of me sitting in the yard in this little dress, my little blonde hair, with the beaters and chocolate stuff all over my face.
Yes.
That is joy right there.
Okay, I love that answer on so many levels. Thank you for taking it. So my mom used to bake all the time, and that was like my brother and I would fight over those.
Yeah.
So she would start to use 2 sets of them so we both could get 2. Like she would literally dirty 2 mixers just so that we both could have 2 to lick off of. And that is, you're right, that is freaking pure joy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Like anybody who's not experienced that really doesn't understand, I think, what joy really is. I love that answer.
But joy, like, is simply, like, look at a child. Like, if we want to find pure joy, look at a child before they get all conditioned and messed up.
Yeah. Yes. We're born as our brightest, most authentic light we'll ever be, right? And then we slowly get dimmed by the world because of the narratives that we put on it. And I think you and I are just people who are trying to turn that dimmer switch all the way back up for people, right? Man. So I do have to ask, around you being a little bit psychic, I'm fascinated, okay? Now, I would tell you that there are elements of, I've been described in moments as like a medium or like, you know, an intuitive. I've never identified or thought to myself around the term psychic. It shows up different for everybody though, right? And everybody, in terms of how their intuition and how those messages download, come in differently for them. I'm curious for you, how it shows up? And is it something that if you focus your energy, you can get the specific information you need? Or is it more around like surrendering and it just comes in when it's relevant? I'm really fascinated. And if it's neither of those and something completely different, then take us down that path too. But I just want to know how it shows up for you. And when did you learn to trust it?
Again, it was around that time where I'd done a lot of that healing, and meditation really helps as well.
Yeah.
But where I started to, and this is a funny story as well, is where I had started to let go of all of this stuff and really get in touch with who I was. I used to get these messages, and it was at this one place that I used to drive by all the time, and then I realized I was right next to a cemetery. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But now what I get is I just have to tap in and just let everything else go and breathe and focus. And I just get, it's either words or a vision. And I don't know if you've seen my logo, Brian, but that was a vision. Like, the entire thing was a vision. It wasn't, I didn't intentionally do that. That came through a vision. Like the name of my show, everything is all comes from a higher power. Like I'll just sit there and it just gets thrown at me. Like, and in my work, things just get thrown at me, like in terms of names for things or direction, or if people ask me for advice on something, it's all coming from a higher power. And I'm just there and I'm like, all right. And it is like really tuning in with your gut and your intuition, and just like developing an intuition, I think, is the best thing you can ever do in life. But to give you a bit of a funnier context, I use it to work out who's going to win the Super Bowl.
How often are you accurate?
About 80% of the time.
All right, I'm placing bets on your psychic prediction next year.
This year, I shit you not, Brian. This year, I picked who the two teams would be in the Super Bowl and who the winner would be 3 weeks ahead of when it happened.
Wow.
I shit you not. And I won a bit of money out of that.
Good for you. At least you've learned to trust it that way. Yeah.
And I also do it with baseball. So there's friends in America who text me going, who's going to win this game?
Oh, man. So I don't identify with being able to apply my intuition towards sports, though I have in many situations felt and anticipated outcomes. And I would suggest that that's one of the things that I often experience is that I see the future that my clients aren't capable of seeing yet. And so my job is just to help them see it and then live into it is a lot of times how I feel. But it's funny because I've described it often when people are like, well, how do you like just see into my soul and be able to put those words to it? I often think I'm just the messenger as well, right? Like I really do believe, I used to focus on trying to access knowledge, and then I would lock up because I was like trying to access or say the right thing or tell them what they wanted. And to me, it's really about surrendering to the place that wisdom can flow through me. And just allowing, which is exactly how you answered. It's like about clearing out all the other noise and just focusing and getting super intentional and being present, which brings us back all the way to the beginning of our conversation. So if I were to like put you on the spot right now and asked you to give me like a psychic reading on what you see for my future or me, is that something you're capable of doing and willing to do?
Oh. I don't normally do that.
Okay.
But if I was to tap in and just look at where I would see you, what's coming through to me is that you'd be next. What I'm getting is next level. Next level. And by that, I'm seeing you in a bigger audience, more people getting your message, more visibility. That's what I'm seeing for you.
Well, that's what I see for my future too. So hopefully I can live into it. Thank you. Thank you. I know I put you on the spot there. So, all right, you've talked a lot about podcasting and your show. And so I'm going to bring it back to there. I said early in my introduction of you that I find you to have been one of the most intriguing interviewers that I have had the privilege of being with. And I say this for those that are listening. I've been on, I don't know, 750 plus other people's shows at this point. Right. So I'm not like a 5 podcast kind of guy where I'm comparing you to one of 5. No, like there's hundreds. Right. Where did you learn your ability to ask questions, and how have you found the most effective approach to getting your guests to go places that they may not even realize they're about to go?
I guess relationships are really important to me, and I need to connect with the person first, and it goes back to when I was in my radio days. And that was very different back then, by the way. I was interviewing rock stars, like people that I admired, and I got to hang out with them, and I would just put them on the spot, and so for me, I kind of developed. That's where I really developed my, I don't know, my shtick or my character, where I would put them on the spot. I'm like, sing for me. I'll be like, serenade me. And so these are like people who are like relatively famous in Australia, right? I'd be sitting with them, and they'd be bearing their soul to me, and they'd be singing to me just like at the drop of a hat. I'm like, I can't believe I'm here right now. So I would just cultivate those moments where I would bring them to me to give me what I would want as a listener. And so I did that with so many people. That was so friggin' cool. And now I do a similar thing, but I do it in a much more sophisticated way, in that I now use my psychic abilities and my messages from above, not only to ask those questions, but also to find the right people to have those conversations with. So, you and I were saying we don't generally prepare for these kind of interviews. I don't either.
I believe that.
And even my choice of person that I speak to, I read their energy. So I may see a photo of them. I don't do any research. I see a photo of them, and I can tell just from their energy whether they're going to be a good fit.
Interesting.
And that's been very, very accurate. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so through that, I also beforehand, I get into a space where I go, well, what do I really want to know, and what do I really want to share? What do I want to? What's my purpose? What's my objective here? Which is the number one thing in communication and marketing, right? That just underlies everything. But it's, what am I curious about? Like, what am I curious about that no one else is? And what do I want to ask that they will never ask? Where will I go that they won't? And I get that a lot, that people go, I've never had someone ask me that, or I've never been able to talk about that, or I've never gone there, or this has been completely different to any other conversation I've had.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. It's like it's almost like I'm a little snake. I want to wriggle in there, and I want to get to the core of what the message is, and do it in a way that's fun, but is also going to touch people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all about humor as well, but I'm all about getting to the point and actually making a change, because that's what it's all about in the end.
Yeah, it totally is. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot again, even using what you just said. So you are a sought after member and a mentor for the Podcast Academy. You judge the Australian Podcast Awards, and you are deeply involved in a lot of different media things. So I'm going to ask the question more broadly to start with, which is, as somebody that's sought after, and you've also helped launch 15 other shows for other change makers in this world. You've helped them amplify their message, grow it, get it distributed, build audience, do all these things that surround community and connection, which is all about what you and who you are about. When you're judging these awards, what is it that you're looking for in podcasts traditionally that would separate, the award winners from the others? And as someone who has such extensive experience in media, in communications, in podcasting, and interviewing and judging all of it, What feedback would you give to me and my show?
A+, my friend. Look, if I had to judge your show based on what I've heard of it and also what I'm experiencing right now, you would get very high marks. I can tell you that. Because what judges are looking for now is they're looking for authenticity. They're looking for something that's unique, that's not heard anywhere else. They're looking for value. And it's interesting that we should be talking about this right now because you know how things sort of float through your world or even through your feeds in social media where you're kind of like, I was meant to see that at this time right now. Now, I don't know if you've heard of an Australian comedian called Hannah Gadsby.
I have not.
She has a couple of Netflix specials.
I'm going to have to look her up then.
She also is gay and was sexually abused by several men in her life. And she talks about, and it came in my feed this morning, I'm like, why is this coming here now? Came in my feed this morning about how she was abused, but she is getting up there and telling her story because her story has value.
Yeah.
And it's, you and I have talked about this before, is the value of our story and what that has to others and ourselves. I judged 35 different shows last year and also had the privilege of going down to Sydney to meet a lot of those people and, you know, TV celebrities, all that kind of thing. And they were asking me for feedback on their shows. I'm like, you know, just, you know, it's really about the value. Give people value. Don't give them what everybody else is. Don't try and be an influencer. Give them value. You've got a really cool position. Use it well. And that was the feedback I gave a TV celebrity.
I love it.
So really, it's about what can I do with this medium to help other people. And we see so many people who get, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but here in Australia, they take a lot of radio shows and then cut them up and make podcasts out of them. They're full of shit. They're just banter and laughing and stuffing around, right? I don't want to hear that. I don't have space in my mind or my time or anything for that, right? I want something that's going to teach me something, that's going to maybe enlighten me in some way.
Yeah.
Something that's going to wake me up and make me think about things a bit differently, like actually make me reflect about my life and what I can do differently. Or what is it that I could do differently that makes my life better or someone else's better?
Yeah.
So it's like, bring something, you know? Don't just make noise and fill the space.
Yeah. I've said for a long time that I think there's a lot of people out there talking and very few with anything to actually say.
Mm-hmm.
And you are somebody that I know not only has something to say, but you have value embedded in everything you say.
Thank you.
It's truly a pleasure to be with you. I have a couple more questions as we start to wrap this up. We kind of shifted it a little bit. We've definitely taken it in a couple different places. We've had some laughter, we've had some light, we've had some love. I would like to know, where, if anywhere, are you still protecting yourself?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't think I'm protecting myself as much as I was. Some of that, and you know this, has lifted in the last number of months. Yeah, I can't pinpoint anything exactly that's actually going, no, you got to hide this part. I'm both barrels at the moment.
I love that. Yeah. I believe that. I fully receive and accept that. And in the time that I've known you and some of the transition I can see and feel, I feel that also, which is really beautiful, right? And what I also want to just call attention to for anybody who's listening to the audio instead of watching the video on this is that there have been multiple moments throughout our conversation that Bindi has felt real deep emotion. You can see it in her eyes. You can see what things are welling up. And why I say that, Bindi, is because I want everyone to understand, like, look, there are resonant memories and cellular memory that can transport us back into moments in our lives that are painful, that we do feel and experience. And there is no final destination, just constant evolution of self. One of the reasons I love the name of your show, the Ethical Evolution Podcast, because everything's always evolving if we allow it, right? But we can evolve, we can heal, we can grow to a place where we're no longer protecting something. And that doesn't mean that we don't feel anything. That doesn't mean we don't ever get triggered. That doesn't mean that we don't ever get back into those lower frequency emotions. It just means we spend less and less and less time there. And it creates more space for us to see all the other areas in our life. You know, this is what's led you down this path of, again, having your debut meditation album, right? Like, super excited that you're getting into that. But I also know that you're involved in a partner in a Hollywood media company, and you've got your hands in so many things that are connected to amplifying messages, creating connection, and really driving purpose. So because you have such a strong, trusted voice, and I have such a level of respect for you, I'd like you to do two things in this next answer. First, tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can learn from your wisdom, how they can consume your show, how they can tap into all of your brilliance in helping bring other messages into the world. And then I'd love it if you could close us with a closing thought spoken from your heart, your soul, your downloads.
Whew. And here I thought I ended things with a bang. You can find me at ethicalchangeagency.com. That's the best place to find me. You can also find the podcast through the ethicalevolutionpodcast.com. But they're all,
and those will be in the show notes, everybody. So
they're all connected. I'm on all the socials under those as well. If you want to find me on Instagram, I'm on DJ Bindi. And if you want to find the meditation album, it's called Source by Spirit. You can find that on pretty much any streaming platform on the planet. But it's also linked on my website as well. Can I just tell you a funny story before I move on?
Please. Brian? Yeah, I'd love to laugh.
So last night, I was one of my favorite shows, and I'm sorry to mention names here, but I really love David Chang. I don't know if you know David Chang, the chef.
I don't.
He's done the first ever live TV show on Netflix, right? And it's a cooking show, but he invites two comedians.
I got to go check this out. This sounds right up my alley.
And so he cooks for them, and he does a couple of different real wacky dishes that are suited to them. So last night he had Lil Jon. You know Lil Jon, the rapper?
Yes, I know Lil Jon.
Now, for those of you who don't know Lil Jon, the rapper, he did that "Turn Down for What?" Anyway, guess what Lil Jon's done with himself?
What?
He's created a meditation album.
What?
Yeah, mate.
Dude, I love it.
I'm not here to promote Lil Jon because I've got one too, but I just was
no, but I mean, that's quite a turn.
Does anybody else find that funny after Turn Down for What? And then he's now got a meditation album.
I love that. I love that. Now the question becomes, and I didn't read it. I didn't see it. I'm hearing it through you. So here's the real question. Is it something he's doing to get attention and remain relevant? Or is this something that he's being moved through purpose and doing because of where he's at in his life? What sense did you get?
He's definitely the latter.
Got it. Okay.
He's even studying to be a herbalist. And
wow. Okay.
Herbalist or otherwise.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Legit, he's doing the tinctures and the shots and the
whole. I have a client who's an herbalist, and she has gone to schools for herbalism and all of it. So yeah, totally understand that. That's awesome. Wow, that's a big shift.
He had a massive big crystal on his chest and everything. I was like, oh, we've gone from the gold bling to this, and he's gone real down the spiritual path. And he was legit. He was even leading a little meditation in the cooking thing. He
went from the gold bling to the crystals that allow everything to just flow and bring.
Look, I don't know. Everybody ultimately ends up a spiritual queen, Brian. What can I say?
I mean, I think every day I wake up, I'm a little bit more of a spiritual queen, and it's okay with me.
Now, what was the second part of the question?
I want you to give a closing statement from your heart and your soul. What's the message you want the world to hear? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to know that Bindi said that moved them and changed their lives? No pressure.
I try to find themes, obviously, through all the people that I speak to, and I really think that the universe plays a big part in this. And I know, again, I sound a bit woo-woo, but there's a reason for this. And with the people that I interview, it's like the universe gives me a nudge, and it's like, there's a message in here. Go on, there's a message in here. And then 2 days later, you'll be someone else, and it's the same damn message. And again, and again. And then the last month in particular is probably a message or a theme that has come through that I think is an eternal one that we all need to learn. Time is so short.
Bindi, thank you for being so real, so open, so present with us and in everything that you do. Time is so short. And I say that through a couple perspectives. As someone who has a healthy relationship with mortality, I realize it could be gone at any moment. Mm. But what I also recognize is that I can't live my life in a zero-sum game, always afraid that it's going to end tomorrow. The only way to take advantage of the statement you just said goes back to one of the points that we've talked about and referenced multiple times throughout this, is to be present in your life. Because that's the only way you bend and manipulate time so that you can actually experience more of it.
And that's what I intend to do.
You're doing it. My friend, thank you so much. I love that we were able to make this work today.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's just been an absolute blessing. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And for those of you that just watched Bindi flip open her lid, man, real raw conversation. We saw the patterns that just continued to repeat themselves and ways and conditioning that caused her to not even see the core of who she really was born to be. But as she continued to lean into healing and continued to step into her own voice, and she continued to finally listen to and look at the light that was being shined on her, she stepped out of her own shadow and into her own light. Now she shines brightly through the whole world for each and every one of you to be able to connect, to be able to change, to be able to evolve, and to be able to come together in a way that is possible for all of us. It will require you 2 things, though. You're going to need to flip open your lid and scan your can. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is, if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.